People of the internet, welcome to Atheist Edge. Joining me tonight, I have Stuart Knechtle of Ask Cliff. How do you say that? Is it Go Ask Cliff? What is it again?
Yeah, Ask Cliff is the YouTube channel.
Ask Cliff, got it. Sorry about that. Yeah. So thanks for joining me so much tonight, Stuart. I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of your debates. You're a very amicable theist, and I enjoy listening to you argue. So I was really looking forward to having a conversation with you. If you could just tell anybody who's watching where they can find you and what they will find when they get there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kaz. It's great. I appreciated our last interaction. And you can find me at Stuart Knechtle on TikTok. That's kind of the biggest audience. And then YouTube second is the YouTube Ask Cliff. And then Instagram is Give Me an Answer or Stuart Knechtle. Facebook, Give Me an Answer. And then Twitter is Ask Cliff. So we're across the board. I think partly we're across the board on social media platforms because we don't know which ones are going to be shut down soon. Perhaps TikTok. We don't really know. So we'll see in the near future here.
Fingers crossed, right?
Right, that's right.
Okay. So let me just lead into this. I wanted to talk to you tonight about one of your posts. I believe it's on TikTok and Instagram. I have it here. I can play it real quick for the audience if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Your ideas, your ability to comprehend the universe is a reflection of a reality, of an objective truth that is out there. That says to me that there is a God, there's a common source that stands behind that objective truth and stands behind the mind that can comprehend that truth.
Why does 2 + 2 = 4? It's probably grounded in a mind outside of simply a math professor's. Before there were any human beings on the face of the planet, was the statement, there are no human beings on the face of the planet, true? When you say there is no objective morality, does that mean that's objectively true? Thinking that there is a mind outside of us makes a lot of sense when it comes to logic and things like free will.
You're right.
Okay. So before I get into that, is there anything you want to add to that? You want to make any kind of caveats or more context or background to that? Anything you want to say about that specifically would be great.
For that specifically, I wasn't even focusing too much on the moral argument, even though that's Shapiro's main thrust right there. For me, it was more so all the inconsistencies that I hear on college campuses, even from a lot of the smartest students. I was just at University of Chapel Hill, and so many of these students, it's the whole "what's true for you is true for you, what's true for me is true for me," and whose truth is it? Oh, but there's no real truth. It's just your truth, but I'm going to tell you exactly how you probably should live. And so it's that whole idea: if there's no moral authority, ultimately, which I would consider God, then you are your own moral authority. And so, you're going to shift the goalposts all the time. You're going to claim, you're going to claim a type of moral relativism, even though they typically don't say they're moral relativists. They'll kind of more so call themselves, they won't really brand themselves, actually. It'll just be more of a matter of what's true for you is true for you. True for me is true for me. But I will lambast you if I believe that your truth perhaps is unjust or somehow doesn't fit into my paradigm. So that's kind of what that video. I did that video in a pretty cursory manner, kind of off the cuff. But so it's more so tied to that type of thinking than kind of the Shapiro point there. Yeah, for the most part, I agree with Shapiro.
Okay, but you're basically trying to focus on what is objective truth as opposed to objective morality. That's more your focus on thrust there. Okay, that's fine. That's great. So let me come at it like this. So I took notes. I first made a transcript of the whole video, and then I just took notes on it. Let's start with what Ben says there. He says, your ideas, your abilities to comprehend the universe is a reflection of the reality of an objective reality, of an objective truth that is out there. I'm sorry, butchered that all so bad. Your ability to comprehend the universe is a reflection of a reality, of an objective truth that is out there. That says to me, that there is a God that is common source, that stands behind that objective truth and stands behind the mind that can comprehend that truth. To me, that just says that there are facts, phenomena, and intricate processes that become and encompass truth. that truth, that your ability to comprehend the universe is a reflection of objective truth, that specific truth. Does that make sense, or should I rephrase?
Yeah, unpack that a little more.
Right.
I get what you're saying, but go a step further.
I'm just saying that there is this idea that there is an objective truth to realities, that reality is what it is. And to me, that just says that there are facts and phenomena and processes that that become that truth. It's not that that truth creates the other way around. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like when he says why, when you come in and you say why does 2 + 2 = 4, I say because 4 - 2 = 2.
Yeah.
It's just that these facts create each other in that way.
These facts create each other. Okay. You're gonna have to, Kaz, you're getting philosophical on me, which is a good thing. You're stretching my mind a little bit here. Because I have heard the argument you're making before, but I still think my point is, again, it's that there's a solid objectivity out there. It's connected more so to, again, the mind behind it all, and whether something's truly right or wrong. The vast moral objectivists that I face are typically either theists or Platonists, and your facts that you're talking about right there still don't necessarily have to do with duties and obligations from a moral standpoint. So the duties and obligations would still be there despite the facts that you're talking about.
Okay. So yeah, let's shift into the more objective morality aspect of it. So let me just say right off to the top that I'm not any kind of educated philosopher. I just study this stuff on my own for fun. I enjoy it and I love it, but of course my knowledge is, modest. Okay, so I am a subscriber of objective morality, of objective truth, and I don't find I don't find models of subjective morality or moral relativism very compelling. I just can't understand why morality or facts even have to be grounded in a mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Um,
and they don't have to be. I think that Dostoevsky's challenge, obviously, if there's no God, all things are permitted. A lot of atheists will be tremendously offended by that idea because they're thinking that you're saying, well, atheists are obviously then the ones who are immoral. But no, I think you can have morals, moral feelings, and that can be from an evolutionary basis. But you still can't have moral obligations, duties, and values without some type of mind. And you don't have to call it a mind. I would say just some type of transcendent source.
okay, so
Mind's been used.
Sorry, go ahead.
A law above the law, lawgiver, Martin Luther King Jr. posited that. There's all different types of names, but if you don't like mind, you don't have to say mind. But what would you say if you wouldn't say mind?
So here's what I would say to modify your statement to be what I would think is true. Objective morality does not exist in the absence of agents. Does that make sense? I'm glad to unpack that, but I think that that's the simplest and
I kind of gets at what I was talking about in my video. Yeah.
So, like, if let's for instance say that you lived in another universe where it was literally just you're the only being in existence there, then there's literally nothing that you can do that anybody else could consider bad. You might consider it bad for yourself, but that's just it's inconsequential because you're the only person there. You won't be able to reproduce. You won't be able to have children. So when you die, everything that you've done is irrelevant, right? So that to me intunes that morality itself is an aspect of the relationship between agents, beings that have the ability to act.
And I would say that your illustration right there is one that would be a defeater towards a social contract, where obviously it's just one person. But I don't understand why there can't be moral obligation and a moral source where there is truly right and truly wrong, that there is something like evil no matter what, even if there's just one person on a planet. Like that would make way more sense to me, that could actually be sustainable versus
So
you have one person, it'd be impossible to have a social contract, obviously.
is there anything that you can think of that you could consider evil, truly evil, that a being could do in a universe by themselves?
I probably could think of one, but you're right. It's typically human to human, or human to animal, or human to, I don't know, you could say a plant if you're a botanist.
So
But I would say typically no. But still God's law remains, or a transcendent source's law remains no matter what, where there's right and wrong. And that's where I take a biblical worldview predominantly, where there was
so
obviously right and wrong, because there was a spirit, there was God hovering over the waters even before human beings existed. And Adam and Eve come into the picture, and it takes two for evil to come in. But even before then, there was a source of evil, and that was the devil. And so, from the Christian perspective, then absolutely.
okay. So like here's how I'm thinking about it. I'm using that hypothetical to distill an idea of what morality is or how it works or something like that, right? And I get that idea that like I said before, that it's something to do with the relationship between agents. But we have to go back to the real world whenever we use an analogy, right? So in the real world, obviously there are many different kinds of agents as well as agents themselves, right? You've got, humans, you've got animals, you've got maybe even computers one day, right? So in that because of that that not moral, that idea that we distilled earlier, that tells me that objective morality does exist. It's just that it exists because there are multiple agents. So I'm not saying that there aren't moral duties or moral facts or moral values. Those are real in the real world now because there are more than one of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But why? So why can't you take the jump though to there being evil? Because you would say there's no demonic. You're a materialist, so there's no potential for a demonic force, or a force outside of our skin and bones.
Right. But I would say that there are evil things that people do, obviously, right? Like for me, the problem of evil that some atheists bring up sometimes, right? To me, the problem of evil has nothing to do with anything concerning humans, interhuman relationships and actions. It has nothing to do with the forces of nature or anything like that, right? The problem of evil comes in when Satan or the adversary is introduced in the Bible. To me, that's the problem of evil, because everything else I can accept. I'm totally fine with free will, human beings doing bad things to each other because they just chose to, right? I'm fine with the processes of nature just being what they are, and that's just how God set it in motion, right? But the fact that he would create an individual agent of evil intentionally, that to me defeats any idea of beneficence or love in my mind. That's the real problem of evil to me.
But then understanding that he didn't create that person evil. He created that person good with a free will, and that person chose to act in a solipsistic, self-absorbed, egotistical, prideful way, where he was completely caved in on himself. And by doing so, all hell, literally and figuratively, broke loose. And so, a lot of atheists will go to that passage in Isaiah as well, talking about how God created evil. But if you get into any good commentary in the Hebrew, it's not that God created evil. That was a form of judgment based off of the free will of a specific civilization. And so I don't see anywhere where it's God creating evil. I see everywhere throughout the Bible, it's just God trying to defeat evil. And Jesus setting up the gates of hell, and evil will not be able to fight back against my church. And obviously Peter's the rock. So I don't see that. I think you could say he created the potential for evil, but evil itself, I don't know how that jump takes place.
Well, I guess it depends on your model of omniscience and God's relationship to time. To me, for most of the models that I've been presented with, that I understand, God is outside of time, that he is he knows everything, all the possible actions and the ones that we will actually take. So to me, it seems that if he created the adversary intentionally, obviously the creation act was intentional, and he knew at the time whatever that being was going to be, then he had a choice to either not create it or create it. And since he chose to create it, he accepts the responsibility of all the things that being does.
Just because he's omniscient?
Right. And he had the choice. He could have not made him or made him. We could have made him different, but he didn't. He made him the way he is.
But why does that automatically mean that he decides for that person? Why can't he limit his power in such a way where he remains all powerful, but he's limiting himself in order to create a free being? And if he doesn't limit his own power, then that free being cannot have any type of loving relationship with him, because then it's just manipulation and a total control.
I mean, that sounds like God.
That there's a limiting, an ability for an omniscient being to limit his or her power.
I mean, I don't think that it's logically incoherent, but I think that the idea that God would limit himself is it characterizes a form of self-deception that I don't think God would do if he were.
If he didn't limit himself at all, though, then how would he give us the opportunity to share in the type of love that he had, in a way where, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, ever since the beginning of time, were able to share? And so he wanted to share that with us so that we could share that with each other. If he didn't limit himself in any kind of way, according to kind of the logic you're abiding by right now, I mean, then we wouldn't be able to have loving relationships. Or do you think we could with him?
I'm not sure what you mean by how does his limitations or lack thereof play into his love for us?
By creating us as our own individual separate agents who, I mean, we can't even wrap our minds around things like the size of this universe or our own, galaxy. Think about if there's a God who created this entire place, we can't even begin to wrap our minds around his omniscience, his omnipotence, all of his communicable and incommunicable attributes. It'd be impossible. And so if you have a God that big, and you're going to have us peons this size with the ability to only comprehend what we can comprehend, then he's going to have to limit himself in some kind of way in order to connect with us. Now, ultimately, the ultimate limitation was becoming a human being. I mean, that's limiting himself for sure. But even beyond that, I think he limits himself as God the Father in such a way where he's saying, you know what? I do know your thoughts. Absolutely. I know what you're going to do, but I'm not forcing you to do it. So I know that you will get hurt if you continue to do cocaine, but I'm not forcing you to do cocaine. I have limited myself in such a way where you do have free will. And so just because I have foreknowledge of it doesn't mean I'm pushing you into it to do it. That sort of thing. That's a type of limiting in numerous ways.
Okay. So I can see where you're coming from as far as, God creating himself as a man for Jesus, to become Jesus. That would be a limitation that God might need. And I understand, like, if this being is so powerful that any sort of communication is disastrous for the beings that receive those messages, then God would need to limit himself in that way in order to allow his messages to get through. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why limiting your knowledge is required. But I mean, it's not really too big of a sticking point for me. We can keep talking about that more if you like, but I'm fine with that, except for it's just that when God is limiting himself as far as his knowledge goes, how are we then able to call him omniscient? Isn't he then, for all intents and purposes, not omniscient?
He takes a step back. It's a good question. He takes a step back in such a way where he remains omniscient and yet gives us so my point there was not to say that he was losing somehow some of his knowledge by giving us knowledge. My point was more so a free will piece where he's giving us free will, and part of that free will is yes, we can think and that sort of thing, but no, he's not limiting his knowledge to give us knowledge. So it's not like he's losing some power in order to give us power in that kind of way. No, he retains all that power, but he's limiting us himself in such a way where if we are not free agents, then we cannot love. And so whatever that limitation might be like, we could get into that in terms of the free will piece. Whatever that might look like, he's still all powerful and omniscient, has all these attributes. And yet he's limiting it in such a way where he's sharing with even human beings who are finite while he remains infinite.
Okay, so let's just move a little bit past that then, just a tiny bit.
Before we get too far,
God has limited.
Sorry to interrupt. This is your show, so I want you to ask all the questions. But I just wanted to ping back to one. Mm-hmm. I feel like we skipped over evil in a rather cursory manner, and I felt like you said the word evil a lot.
I'm going to come back to it right now.
Can I kind of push you on that one a little bit? Because
sure.
So that one's been in my mind recently for an atheist, and how I think atheists today get off the hook a little too quickly and easily in talking about evil. Mm-hmm. Ian Wilson, one of the most famous atheists in the last, I think that's his first name. I know it's Wilson. I've read a little bit of his stuff, but I was reading his biography recently, just pieces of it. And, he was part of the Christopher Hitchens inner circle, and he was considered kind of one of the top dogs, probably bigger than Dawkins even. And he became a Christian because of evil, not the problem of evil, but because he didn't think from his atheistic perspective you could make sense of evil at all. I would say the majority of people, even still today, believe that the word evil is a strictly religious term. And that's why so many secularists try and steer clear of using that word. So I think Wilson, obviously he played off the moral argument too, but he especially used this evil one where it's like, from a strictly materialistic, naturalistic perspective, why am I using the word evil? What does that connote? And is it fair of me to even use it? Should I be coming up with a different word? And then secondly, a closer to home example of it is, I've got a good buddy who worked on the Newtown Sandy Hook shooter. Was at Dylan Roof, and I worked with him through a lot of the journals that he wrote. It was like 300 pages, and they went on Fox News. He went on Fox News with this atheist psychologist, and the atheist psychologist had to move himself to the point of saying this was evil what I saw, beyond just behaviorism, bad parenting, beyond just mental health. And he said, look, it's a supernatural thing. And he didn't want to say it. And my buddy was right there when he was kind of struggling with this. So when you say evil, how come, if you're a strong materialist, how come you can automatically get off the hook for that? And why do these guys who are strong atheists struggle with that one so much?
So I guess when I'm saying the word evil, what I mean is the furthest edges of the spectrum of what we call bad. And what is bad, right? That begs the question, what is bad? Bad is obviously not good. And what is good? That is the question that is ultimately the question, right? To me, good is cooperation. It's a perspective on cooperation where you are trying to cooperate with every single thing that exists. At the same time, you're trying to cooperate with everything that exists in space and in time. You're trying to cooperate with the future and the past. You're trying to cooperate with single-celled organisms and everything else. You're just trying to find the balance of situations where all these things can exist without harming each other.
Where'd you get that from?
Where do I get it from? Well, several places. There's this. I should have it ready to go.
No, sorry. I don't mean I don't mean sources. I just mean, but where do you get that common ground for the common good? How do you get that definition of good? Like whose definition?
Cooperation. Whew, okay. So, this my model of morality, right, is this conglomeration of ideas that I'm working through, right, and I'm trying to get it, in a very solid, singular kind of a package. But I'm just trying to give you the, I don't know what the word is for this,
Bare bones.
the essence of it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I figure that whatever objective morality is, it has to be something based on irrefutable facts. And then I ask myself, what are those facts? And long process of thinking and arguing and whatever. What I've come to is that the facts are that agents exist and they desire to survive. That is a fact of all agents, and they require resources. They require each other's efforts for survival, and yeah, I think those are there's probably one more, but based on those facts, I have them all written down somewhere. I'm not prepared to present it right now yet because I'm still working on it, right? But there are these facts that you can infer from that how and exactly how good things can be differentiated from bad things by supporting those facts.
Why don't you just settle with Occam's razor and come on over to the divine mind side and simplify things a little bit, Kaz? I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, it can't be simple, right? The
I
answer
know,
for what
exactly.
is objective
I know
morality
it's
can't be
weird.
simple.
It's not going to be simple either way.
Yeah, I really should get to work on that a little bit more. But it's just there's so many different ideas and there's so many different things to do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I have
Yeah,
these.
no, it's
I have
great.
this set of facts that are about agents that are universal, and when you analyze those facts, you can extrapolate from them morality.
Mhm. But you're still going to have an issue there with obligations and duties, right?
No, I don't think so. Okay, so like here's one. One second. I have it written down here.
Like, just back to evil for a second. The reason why,
My notes.
I can't look at evil and say, "Oh, a God exists." I can't look at love and say, "Oh, a God exists." I think so many of these, whether it's Wilson, I could name a lot of guys who were ironclad atheists for so long and became Christians because of things that just made sense of their life when they encountered them. So it's typically, when I look in their bios, it's like love, evil, morality, meaning, purpose. It's kind of, those are kind of the five big ones where it's not like, oh, that's direct evidence for God, but it's more so, if I live out my life, I encounter these things, and I don't know how to explain them from a strictly materialistic perspective, because I see objectivity in meaning and purpose and morality. They would talk about love in such a way where I know it's got to be more than just my endorphins. It's got to be more than just empathy and sympathy. There's got to be something stronger here going on. That's obviously, ephemeral. It's non-tangible. And then it's the same kind of idea with evil. Sam Harris would go to the point of saying, oh, the Cheshire shootings right up the street. Why did the guys get such a bad sentence? He said that recently, right? For raping and burning that house down with those girls in it. They had a tough time in prison before that, and they were raised by bad parents. Like that's Sam Harris's whole argument, and it's a total joke. Like I think Sam Harris is a really smart guy, but like, are you really going to land there, or are you to the point of being like, yes, there was absolutely poor parenting, poor mental health, absolutely, but this is evil, and we have no other word for it, and evil implies something beyond strictly the reductionistic, materialistic, naturalistic worldview, something beyond that. And there's endless amounts of illustrations of it. Hannibal Lecter with Officer Starling. She's saying, "Oh, what happened to you?" And he said, "You just can't handle it. That I'm evil. You can't handle that this is me." And so that's what I mean when I'm struggling with these words. So often atheists want strong evidence. Well, it's like, just live out your life. I mean, we can get into a type of sure, we can get into all the philosophical arguments, but just live out your life. And I think you're going to run into a lot of different potholes by assuming that type of strictly reductionistic worldview.
Okay. I understand where you're coming from there. Let me come at it this way. I found my note here. So
Okay.
it is a fact that if I kill my neighbor, the rate of premature death is increased. You agree with that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It is a fact that all living agents avoid death in at least involuntary biological function, if not by analyzing circumstances and taking active steps to auto-regulate behavior. Would you agree with that one?
Yep.
I'll repeat it if you want. Okay.
Yeah. Repeat the
Therefore,
very end of that one, though.
sure.
Auto-regulate.
Avoid death in at least involuntary biological function, if not by analyzing circumstances and taking active steps to auto-regulate their behavior.
Okay.
Okay. Therefore, if I kill, my likelihood of being killed is factually increased.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fact that I avoid death. Therefore, if I wish to be consistent with the facts observant of their actual logical implications with respect to my biological imperative of survival, I can derive that I ought not kill.
Yeah, it's just a selfish thing.
Right. Egoism, 101.
And I think, yeah, that could be a logical. Sure, I agree. I believe you can get to moral objectivity from that type of linear perspective, but I don't think that fits with. Okay, so who was the lawyer that did the O.J. Simpson trial from Harvard? Whatever his name was, it doesn't matter. He talked about, or maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was this professor at University of Florida, actually. Regardless, they talked about these worldviews, and they talked about how that worldview that you kind of were just espousing right there, or connected to your worldview, is a strictly selfish one, where it's the, in many ways, quid pro quo. And he was saying that we don't live that way. Like, if a woman's walking across the street and she spills her groceries, it's an old elderly woman, you're going to go help her from a shame and honor culture from, say, China. You're going to go help her because you want to remain guiltless and you want to keep your family's honor by being this person who helps her because you're out there and you're in the open. And there's so many countries like that. But then all of a sudden, the Judeo-Christian morality came here to the U.S. and we're not thinking of, I just need to help her to keep my family's name intact. No, you help the woman because she's an old lady and because you're going just to help her for her own sake. And so basically this professor from university, I don't think it was Dershowitz. I don't think it was the OJ. He made a very similar point to this guy, comparing these two cultures. But this guy from University of Florida, his whole point is like, we're all living as Christians. And that's our moral code, based off of where it's not just this type of selfish egoism where I'm not going to harm you, just because I don't want you to harm me. No, we're going to sacrifice. We're going to step out and actually risk our own type of well-being to help somebody else. And that's a strictly Christian perspective and point of view. And so I think we live into it. So what I'm hearing you say is, perhaps you might agree with me and those professors on this, but you would say still you can get more objectivity from the selfish egoism.
Yeah.
So is your point, it doesn't matter which one you get it from, which way?
I mean, it doesn't matter. So the pure, absolute, true Platonic version of altruism, I don't believe exists. I think that our altruistic tendencies are based on our egoistic desires. I think that if you are a person who is taught from a very young age to that it is a good thing to help people. It is a good thing to not let an old woman on the side of the road drop her groceries, for instance, right? Then when you see that happen, you're going to feel a emotion that tells you that you have to act or you will continue to feel bad. And you're not going to be able to articulate that necessarily in the moment. It may be after a reflection, whatever. But I believe that the act of going to help that old woman is simply to avoid the negative feelings of feeling like you were a bad person for not doing it. That's what compels you. I mean, it's demonstrated when you see people who don't do that, right? People who weren't taught what it's good to help old people. When you see people just walk past, what was that one? Oh man, I can't remember. There was a woman in New York who was
Yeah,
brutalized,
right, in the
and
90s or
and
80s.
yeah, so it was like a long time ago, and a bunch of people
Yeah.
just watched from their if it were the case that this was some kind of intrinsic fact of reality, uh, beyond, or should I say below, the existence of agents, that it was just something that we're partaking in, then I think that would never happen. That seems to be antithetical to that.
And I think their point again, it's an ethical system that we all live in, and it's like it's like the papa fish with the baby or the two kid fish. They're swimming along, and they're asking the question of what is water, and so I think it's just the water that we're swimming in that we don't even realize that is Christian, it's Judeo Christian. So I think that's their point. I don't necessarily think it's their point that they're saying that somehow Christians are worse or Christians are better, or that there's not going to be holes in the Christian ethical system in terms of sin. Because obviously, I would call that sin. Like that was a tremendously selfish move. Although, wait a second, that's an interesting illustration that you just brought up. Because from the materialistic perspective, I think a materialist would have a tougher time with that one, because those people are simply saving their own skin. Why wouldn't it make more sense from that selfish, egoistic perspective that you just said for them to stay indoors? Because they're not armed and they're not going to go out there and help that poor woman. They heard her screaming, but they're going to stay inside and save themselves and probably their families. Makes a lot of sense. From the Christian perspective, so you just kind of, I think, all of a sudden had this little bit of a, whatever you want to call it. I think you had this level of conviction right there, and moral outrage, perhaps even. I think we all do when you think about that actual illustration that happened in the city, because that's a godly Christian perspective that steps out of something like Darwinism, something like strictly a morality from evolution, or just a type of morality when there is no God. Like it's not strictly selfish. It's actually something where, no, I need to act. I need to act in such a way where I don't care what others think of me. I mean, maybe some people do, but I need to act in such a way where I'm going to save this poor woman. And that's definitely not for my own best interests.
Well, it could be, right? For instance, right, if you were to take action in that situation, right, there's a possibility that you might die, right? And you're aware of that possibility, probably keenly, right? But there's also a possibility that you don't, that you're successful, that you stop this act from happening. And then what happens? Now you are the hero. Now you get accolades. Now you get praise. You get admiration. It's a gamble. And it may not be a calculation that you do in the moment consciously. But the fact is, if it's not certain death, if it's not absolutely certain that you will die, then it's very likely that you're making a gamble for more personal gain.
Sure, no, I agree with that, but still, at the very heart of it, you're still going to be dealing with moral absolutes and feelings of obligation to act. And the question becomes, where does that come from? And I think it's a very hard case to make, to say it comes from somehow just wanting a ribbon, wanting to be recognized, or no, or somehow it comes from survival of the fittest, or somehow it comes from social contract, or somehow it comes from moral Platonism, laws just hanging in the air. I think you need something way beyond that to make sense of our moral conscience and how we automatically want to hop in. I mean, if we have, I think if we have all of our faculties working in such a way where we have that moral outrage. And so no, I agree with you. There could be I don't know, one or two. I think it's very few, but there could be one or two people who are thinking, I'm going to go down there and save that woman so I can be on Fox 5 tonight. I think the people who probably going to go risk their lives are probably not thinking in that way. But even if they were, still, the moral outrage for us behind it, where does that come from? Because I think the system that you set up, yeah, I do think you could get to objectivity from the system that you set up, but I still think it's a selfish one. And I don't think it really makes sense of what we experience on a day-to-day basis.
So the feelings of the moral phenomena of feeling, the feeling of a moral phenomena, I should say, right? I think that's totally separate from the actual obligations. I don't know if you have a partner or whatever, right? But sometimes my partner eats things that I don't like, and sometimes I eat things that she doesn't like, right? And we will say things like, "Why are you eating that? You should, quote unquote, not eat that." These things that is a feeling like this is some kind of right or wrong when it comes to somebody's preference on a dish, but that's totally devoid of any actual obligation or value there. It's just what I want, but I can feel that morality there, even though it's not real. And I think that that's the same kind of thing with all the things, right? The actual obligations, the actual facts of the morality, they are there, and we have a correlation with our feelings, but they're not necessarily perfectly entwined.
Well, when I hear you say should, though, for me that's beyond emotion. For me, should again is connected to a source that is outside of myself, that I would say is outside of society too. You could make a claim it's for society in one instance, but for me, it's if I say should or ought to, it's interesting to me how that's smuggling in a type of moral object.
It's beyond society for me too.
Because the feelings, just to finish on this, because the feelings you can get from an evolutionary standpoint, I think the feeling and the emotions of, oh, that's not good, that's not right. But as soon as you say shoulds and oughts, that's obligations.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that it is beyond society. It's beyond, what we consider our daily lives. It's deeper than that. One example I like to use is bees. So the queen bee, she does, I think it's just honeybees perhaps, but the queen bee does a flight in the sky. It's a couple hundred feet above the ground, I believe, where the drones congregate. And she will do a flight through that drone congregation area, and all the bees will try to mate with her as she goes through there. And only a select few will actually get a chance, right? It's a lot like an egg and a sperm. I believe that the word should, that the word ought applies to those kinds of things. I believe that a bee should try to mate with the queen, that the queen should try to get away from go through the drone army or whatever. The morality is about the relationship between agents, and anything that has the ability to act on its own autonomously is one of those agents. So, I mean, there's morality that applies to amoebas. There's morality that applies to us, and it's all the same. It has to be the same, otherwise it's not universal.
But why are you convinced that every bee should go mate? I mean, I'm guessing you're trying to appeal to a type of moral system that is based off of human flourishing now, or
no, not human flourishing. It's more
if it's not flourishing, then why should they then? Why should they go mate with the queen bee?
It's more about the flourishing of agency. It's about the universal desire of all agents to survive, because we all have that desire, and it is universal and ubiquitous. That is the thing that you can base it on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Gotcha.
Here's a good question. What about parasites that exist in 99% of insects and eventually causes the insect to become a zombie and kill itself? So like that is an example of something that let me just use human viruses as a better example, right? It's analogous to that. When we create a retrovirus that we use to be a carrier for some kind of specially designed DNA code that will help us to fight infections, that is, I think, an example of finding the cooperative balance between ourselves and that single-celled organism. That organism now gets a chance to, he gets a free ride, a ticket to the future on its evolutionary trails, so to speak, because it has found a way to cooperate with us. Didn't find, we found it, whatever. But the same, it applies, right? There's a cooperative effort there. The single-celled retroviral thing is helping us, and we're keeping it going in perpetuity. That's the kind of thing we need to do with everything.
But that's just your truth,
so to speak.
I mean, why is that any better than my truth? When I think that, you know, some of those insects or the humans could be suicidal and not want to cooperate and not want to flourish, and so why not just let them? Why I don't understand, why is that the moral objective perspective? Because you could have many who don't want that type of perspective. They don't want to carry on.
Right. When an agent chooses not to avoid death, they usually die, I would say. But they self-select themselves out of the population of living agents. So when you're selecting death, then you no longer have morality applies to you because you are effectively dead.
Yeah, but before death, though, you're saying even
well,
the
before death, you're
process,
still, until you actually kill yourself, you are still breathing, you are still metabolizing, you are still biologically, involuntarily making efforts to survive.
And so you're saying, your point is still then, just because they don't want to cooperate doesn't make it more of a subjective than objective type of truth. You're saying still there's an objective truth out there, and they're wrong in it by wanting to end their lives rather than cooperate with the group and moving forward. Like I'm still having a tough time where you're. Like I see where you're going. I still just don't understand though how you can fully get there in terms of the moral objective piece just because of the cooperation.
What do you mean when you say objective?
When I say objective, I mean something that is right and wrong, no matter what I think, no matter what society thinks, no matter what the powerful think, no matter what you think. There's something right and wrong outside of all of that.
What about
That's
God?
That's moral objectivity. Yeah.
Is it regardless
Objective,
of what God
wrong.
thinks?
Subjective is my own personal experience, my own taste.
Is it regardless of what God thinks?
No, I would say it has to call it God or call it a transcendent source. Call it a divine mind. It's something. It's a law above the law. It's something outside of these different. Yeah. Of us being able to describe and define it.
I mean, but God is a subject as well, right? He has a singular perspective, even if it's omniscient or omnipresent or whatever. It's still God's and not yours, not mine, not anybody else's, just God's, right?
It's God's, but we can certainly have access to understanding based off of how he created us in his image, to understanding what is truly right and wrong. And knowing that in our very conscience, I mean, unless you sear your conscience, and then evil starts to take place. But if you don't sear your conscience, then you have a clear, objective understanding what is right or wrong. So yes, in some sense, it's singular. I'd have to dissect what you mean by singular.
I mean, it's just that it's his and nobody else's. Nobody else has that perspective.
Right.
So
nobody has that level of omniscience.
Right. I'm just trying to get to the point I'm making is that God's God's perspective is a subjective one as well. So if God is the instantiator of morality, of facts, or whatever, then reality itself is subjective.
Well, no, we would say, back to the Ben Shapiro thing, we would say 2 + 2 = 4 is objective. We would say that Kaz and Stuart love tomato soup is
No,
subjective.
I would say that, but you would say 2 + 2 is 4 because God said so, right?
No. No, not at all.
No. Okay, so here we go. Now we're getting to the meat of the disagreement, and the confusions. Okay,
No,
so
not even close. I'm simply going by societal definitions right now of objectivity and subjectivity. What I just gave right there was a societal. I mean, that's everybody in our society would agree on the definition I just gave. So I was not ushering in. I was completely. It was a dovetail next to our discussion on God's objectivity.
So 2 + 2 = 4, regardless of what God's opinion is.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't expect you to say that, actually. I'm confused then as to if mathematical facts, for example, can exist without God, then why can't moral facts exist without God?
Well, I think mathematical facts agree because we have discovered them, not created them. We've discovered, I mean, the Pythagorean theorem, we did not create. We discovered it, and we were able to certainly organize it into a very nice way. And so we do have a mathematical system, thank God, for it. But the mathematical laws, we so frequently, it's so easy to forget this. The mathematical laws, physics, gravity, all of these things, they're discovered. They're not created by us. You'd agree with that, right?
Of course, yes.
So when we talk about facts in such a way, where it's 2 + 2 = 4, I'd say, again, it's not humanity that directly, obviously created and designed and perfected all of that. No, it's connected to something obviously outside that we have drawn from and harnessed in such a way where we can have mathematics. So in that sense, it's objective. So we've created this system. I mean, again, we've created a system based off of the mathematical laws that we have discovered. And so we've created a system where it can be agreed upon by everyone who buys into the system that 2 + 2 = 4, rather than a subjective taste that Kaz and Stuart both like celery soup.
Well, I mean, how do I want to come at this? So let me just first try to make sure that I understand where you're coming from here then. The fact that 2 + 2 = 4 is an agreement with God. Is that how I should summarize it? Is that a steel man of what you just said, or is that weak?
In a sense, but you'd really have to draw that one out. I would just say, I mean, that's the whole idea. All truth is God's truth. But for me, you could just state that God gave us creative minds to creatively go about finding basically where his fingerprints are and what he's done in such a way to help us flourish. And we're obviously flourishing by using something like mathematics, but it's not like he directly. I don't like the direct connection. You see what I mean? There's steps between God and mathematics. I mean, it's steps between God and 2 + 2 = 4. It's not just like God and 2 + 2 = 4.
If God didn't make these 2 fingers plus these 2 fingers equal these 4 fingers, then what did God have to do with it?
God had to do with exactly what C.S. Lewis talked about. And it's exactly what Tom Holland and so many talk about today, which is God is the lawgiver, and there is natural law out there. And so now we have the creative minds to go about finding what these laws are that the lawgiver has put in place. And
Yeah,
so
so that to me sounds like God made 2 + 2 = 4.
what do you mean by made? I guess
Like
maybe that's where we're
2
getting.
+ 2 could have equaled 3. It could have equaled 5 or a billion, but God said, nope, it's going to equal 4.
Yes, God, exactly. God created a type of objective system that gets back to the order and design of the universe that gave us the possibility to have humanity, to have this world. So in that sense, by giving us that creative type of genius and ability, that's absolutely connected to 2 + 2 = 4.
So I mean, if that's what you believe, I mean, I don't really know how to. There's no way to debunk that per se. I mean, I can't tell you um, that some naturalistic process created quantities. I think that
Steel
it's
man, the typical Christian who would tell you exactly kind of what you're trying to put there for me, and what your response to that Christian would be.
I'm confused. What do you mean by the typical Christian? What were they?
You
What was their
wanted me to
position?
say the direct connection of God and 2 + 2 = 4, and you thought I was going to say that. So
Right. Yeah.
obviously you've run into Christians who say that. What's your response to them?
Okay. Yeah. If a Christian comes to me and says that God's nature is the essence of all facts, that 2 + 2 = 4 only exists because it's in God's mind per se, right? I think I've heard that before. Um, I well, I mean, I think the best way to come at that is to just describe how quantities relate to each other. I mean, the word two and the word four are superfluous to this. It could be dos and quattro, it could whatever, right?
Mhm.
It could be no words at all. It could just be me holding my fingers, right? But I don't see how it's even remotely logically possible that these fingers could be any other number of fingers, regardless of what you call that number. I don't see how that's even, it doesn't make sense to me at all. I think that it's just, no disrespect, but I think it's just gobbledygook, I think it's just, this is 4 fingers, and what does it have to do with the mind? How does a mind have anything to do with it? I don't get it.
Mm. Well,
I mean, here's
but
the
here, well, but
when
like,
God, okay, wait, 1 second. Before
yeah,
God ever created anything, right? When God was just God by himself, right? That's a quantity, a single, a one, right? And because one exists, then all the other relationships to all the other quantities exist. One implies two, implies three, implies all the other numbers, implies a Pythagorean theorem, implies all that stuff, right? So God didn't even have to do anything to create math. It's just existence, his existence, right? In that model. But if we just don't assume that there's a God, then it's implied by this singular existence of uh one wave of energy, by the single existence of anything. The reality is singular, and because reality is singular, that means quantities exist.
sure. But again, with the 2 + 2, and it's just 4 that you're saying. Think about again the immense amount of rationale, logic, creativity, basically a mind it would take to discover that. And from your worldview, it becomes the perspective of it's the whole idea of we said we're simply here by chance, and we're basically just a higher, more highly evolved monkey's mind. And so, would you really trust the ideas of a monkey? There's no designer, there's no creative mechanism ultimately. And so, how can you even begin to get truth from your thoughts? That's kind of a ridiculous idea. And so, to land here with 4, I mean, I could put it back on you just as much as then with a God.
Okay, so you just said that how can you trust your own mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I would ask you to that is,
Bro,
well,
how you doing on time here, by the
am
way?
I skipping your? We can go whenever, we can start wrapping up whenever you'd like to. I
I
usually go
just gotta
about
go.
an
Like,
hour and a half, but
how's 3 minutes? Three to
in three
five
minutes, you
minutes.
want to go? Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, um, so let me just ask you this then. You said that a mind. Remind me what you just said. I'm so sorry. Lost my train.
Well, I was just going at the four that you were talking about because I was confused. Again, there's so much creativity in what we're talking about that, from a strictly materialistic perspective, I don't know how we even get at truth. It's the whole. Well,
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna
How
get
do you
there.
trust your mind? Yeah.
How do you trust your
I
mind,
mean,
and then how do you get truth from strictly an evolutionary perspective?
right. So I think that everybody gains confidence in their own mental capacity um by experience, just by living their lives and seeing what happens. I think it goes back to when you're a very brand new baby, when you cry out and then you notice that your mother is giving you milk, or whatever the reaction is. You notice that your actions have reactions, and then you learn how to manipulate your environment by controlling your actions. And these are like little hypotheses, little experiments that you're doing at every moment of your infantile life, where you are gaining evidence, objective evidence. Well, not objective, it should be subjective, right? It's subjective evidence of your ability to reason. And you can, there's tests, there's quizzes, there's, games, whatever, puzzles. All these things are evidence of your ability to reason. If you can do a puzzle, that's evidence that you're better than average at reasoning. So I have evidence. It's not proof. It's not concrete proof. I don't have 100% certainty that I am a reasonable person, that I have the ability to use logic. I just have a mountain of evidence, a mountain of circumstantial evidence from the last 37 years of my life. And that's what I use.
And the whole point, I guess, still is how do you just get that from an evolutionary perspective on things, and back it up even further? How do you get that if there is no divine mind, if there is simply chaos and disorder creating incredible order and intricacy that leads ultimately up to your mind and the cognitive processing and the abstract thinking and the ability to think after things like meaning and purpose that land on something like truth that we can all agree on? I mean, there's just so many gaps I see in there that just get bigger and bigger, as opposed to if there is a divine mind that created us as creative agents who can creatively go about doing all the things that you and I just talked about tonight when it comes to 2 + 2 = 4 and mathematics. Wouldn't it just make way more sense? And I think in this area, it certainly would you not?
Um, no, I don't. I think that if you're unable to I think that the same problem would apply equally if we were to try to trust the mind of a god. If you heard of Maxwell, I think it's Maxwell's demon. It might be another demon, but it's the demon where it's fooling you and creating your reality for you at all times, like you're in the Matrix. Everything that you've ever heard about God, every word that you've read in the Bible could be generated by that demon. So I mean, if we can't trust our ability to reason, that happens way before we even think about God.
Sorry, run that back again.
I can't remember the name of the philosophical demon that's in this thought experiment, but it's a thought experiment where you are being fooled from the day you're born into this fake reality, this matrix reality. They're creating it for you and generating it all the
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
and
right.
it's to get you to question your ability to trust your senses. And I'm saying that if if God is part of your reality, part of your paradigm, that's still a problem, because you every time you read the Bible, every time you've gone to church, could be a demon generated illusion, and all your beliefs about God could be, it could actually be that demon, right? We don't know. We can't have absolute certainty about anything. I think that all we can do is just use the best evidence that's possible, and I think that the problem is that the Bible, is just very, very weak evidence.
Yeah, but it's evidence that our country in the West has been built on, in terms of getting back to just the divine mind and the moral argument that you and I have been talking about. That I think your ethical system that you're forming together right now has a lot of bright spots to it, and a lot of probably holes that can be easily poked in it. But it's so extremely complicated. How are you gonna replace the ethical system, the Judeo-Christian values that we've built this entire country and that the West at large has been built on, with a better system? And it's a system that was grown out of the very pain, sweat, tears, blood of Jesus Christ himself, who, as God, came down here as a slave to create an ability for us to have human rights, as well as a possibility to have universal preservation of all, in such a way that no other country or ethical system has ever had anything like it. And now humanistic values that materialists are trying to adopt are simply the fumes out of the Christian faith. And so again, I think like so much of this is philosophical, and that's great, and there can be some connections made, but when you get to day living, how's it going to be applied? I mean, the Humanist Manifesto
is
very, very similar to me for some reason. And so
the
Bible is not evidence.
I empathize with your argument there.
Yeah, the Bible is not evidence for God. The Bible is not some type of holy book that's dropped out of the sky in such a way where it is perfect and answers every single question. No, but what's germane to the topic tonight is, I don't think any ethical system or morality comes close in the day-to-day living, and there's a reason for that. That doesn't mean, it's not proof that, again, God is real or anything, but it gets back to the nitty-gritty. Like, okay, what's the answer if it's not that?
Let me just respond to that, and then I'll let you go, because I know you gotta go.
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to trying to replace the Judeo-Christian moralistic model here, we see that it's already coming apart. I mean, I probably would ask you, if I'd asked you cold at the beginning of this discussion, do you think that America is on an uptrend or a downtrend? I'm guessing you'd probably say a downtrend, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that to me should be evidence that whatever moral foundation America was built on was not strong enough. So, I mean, it may have been the best thing since sliced bread when it was first incepted, as far as other moral models go. I mean, of course, if you're living in a world where, you know, your next door neighbor is trying to sacrifice their baby to Baal or whatever, then yeah, hating gay people and oppressing women is not so bad. But I think that when it comes to what is objectively true about morals, we're still on the path to discovery there. And as far as trying to force people or compel them to do it, I think that my hypothesis is that the features of true objective morality would be so that it would never require any kind of coercion whatsoever. It would be self-evident. And of course, you know, my particular articulation is, you know, embryonic at best. But I think that whenever we do actually get the articulated version of actual objective morality, it will just be unquestionable. There won't be any argument. There won't be any debate. You're going to hear the words, and it's just going to be like, you know what? Yeah, you're right.
It would almost be like, from above.
Miraculous, even. Almost. Yeah. Definitely.
Kaz, so appreciate you having me on, man. Let's do it again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Definitely. Really appreciate it, Stuart. Stuart is linked in the description below, guys. If you liked hearing from him, if you want to hear more from him, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And please remember that it is the bridges we build, not the bridges we burn, that give us the edge. Have a great night.